Diabetes Connections is brought to you by One Touch. Every touch is a step forward. By Dexcom. Take control of your diabetes and live life to the fullest with Dexcom. And by No Foods. No grain, no gluten, no guilt.
This is Diabetes Connections with Stacey Sims.
Welcome to a bonus episode of Diabetes Connections. I'm Stacey Sims, and this episode is going to be very different from anything that has come before it. I have been approached by a podcast network to run some promos for their shows. The network's called Wondery, and I think the shows are great, at least the ones they've asked me to take a look at. But along with the promo for their show, I wanted to give you some information about the G6. So stand by to hear more about a new show from Wondery that is all about the workplace, and it's about advice. It sounds terrific. But I wanted to tell you a little bit about our brief experience with Dexcom's G6. As you know, and as I say at the top of every episode, Dexcom is one of the sponsors for the podcast. And that's one of the reasons why we received the G6 early. They sent out, I believe, 1,000 early release G6 shipments, and we were one of the people who was on that list. If you are new to the show, if maybe this is your first episode, my son Benny was diagnosed right before he turned 2. He is now 13. We have used the Dexcom system since he was 9, so that's 4 years ago. It's a little over 4 years now. And so we've seen it go from the G4 with no share capability at all to the cradle, and then to the G5 pediatric, the G5, the share, and now the G6. And I just wanted to tell you a little bit about our experience with it. We'll be talking about this much more, of course, in the weeks to come. I'll be talking to Dexcom about it. I'd love to hear from you and see what your experiences are. We did a Facebook Live on this. We've done one or two since we received it. And the basic upshot is Benny loved the insertion. That was the biggest difference from any Dexcom that has come before it. If you're familiar with the Dexcom and you've listened to this show, you know I've referred to it as a torture device. It doesn't necessarily feel like a torture device, but it sure looks like one. The G5 and previous inserters are large and bulky. They're difficult to do one-handed. The G6 inserter seems to be much easier to insert one-handed. I am not a person who inserts a Dexcom, so I don't have first-hand knowledge. But when Benny did it, he said that he felt nothing. And he says that the Dexcom G5 is pretty comfortable in terms of insertion. He thinks it is more comfortable than the pump insertion. He has used an Animas and a T-Slim pump. And just for comparison's sake, he thinks that the older Dexcom inserter is fine, a little bit better compared to those. He also has used the Libre. We tried that. The Libre, which is more of a flash glucose monitor. It measures continuously, but only displays your glucose levels when you scan it. And he said the Libre was pretty comparable with the older, the G5 inserter, but he thinks the G6 was the least painful. I mean, he said he didn't feel it at all, and that's unusual for him. So we were very excited about that. We've had it on for less than a week. It has performed basically the same as the G5. We don't calibrate it. We haven't calibrated it at all. I have checked by finger stick. And curiously, he's still got the Libre on the other arm. And they have been pretty much within, I don't really do percentages, but when we've checked, it's been like 5 to 10 points. I mean, I haven't felt the need to do any math or be puzzled by anything. We've always had very good accuracy. We're very fortunate that way. And this seems to be continuing that trend for us. I guess for us, it'll be interesting to see A1C-wise how it all plays out, how close it really is to the lab results. But it's always hard to get lab results in real life anyway. And this is just our experience with it. I did laugh because, last night we lost signal. I was kind of hoping that they had fixed that. But our electronics live in the hallway. My kids cannot have their phones in their rooms at night. Even if you have diabetes, your phone lives in the hallway. And generally speaking, it's close enough and the Bluetooth wiggles through the doorway and we're okay. That's a technical term, wiggles. But last night I lost signal I don't know, probably 2 to 3 hours. It was fine. I'm not very nervous about that. We went over 7 years without a CGM, so I don't panic if I lose signal overnight. But God, I was really hoping that the G6 had fixed those problems that we have had intermittently, and I know some people have had a lot. I thought he lost signal for quite a long time today, but it turns out that he let his phone battery die. So, he's 13 years old. When you're doing, experiments with a teenage boy, these things get interesting. So that's the honest first couple day experience with the G6. So far, so good. And we'll keep you posted. I'm going to come back after this promo and tell you just a little bit about the T-Slim and the G6. I have a tidbit. I think you'll want to hear more about it. But first, let me introduce you to this show. Yeah, this is different for me, but let's see how it goes. All right, so we've all had those days at work, right? Everything stinks. Your to-do list is getting longer. You can't get anything done. The coffee's lousy. Your coworker's taking credit for your work. The worst part about stuff like that is who do you talk to about it? There's a great new podcast from Wondery called Safe for Work. Now, it's hosted by a former bigwig over at Nike and a former lawyer who take your questions and calls, and then they give you advice to help you find happiness in the workplace. Check it out, and if you like it, go subscribe and listen to Safe at Work on Apple Podcasts, wherever you listen to this podcast right now. And there is a link, of course, in the show notes and more information about the G6 there as well. All right, here's the promo for Safe for Work.
From Wondery, this is Safe for Work. Job stress, life relief. I'm Liz Dolan.
And I'm Matt Ritter.
On today's show, we'll be chatting with Rainn Wilson about his production company, Soul Pancake. I'm super excited about that. And one of his first days of work. And, of course, about playing Dwight on The Office, the world's most dreaded coworker.
Congratulations on the new podcast.
Thank you. Okay, I'm going to give you an example of a letter we got, and you tell me what advice you would give this person.
Okay, good.
I have the world's most annoying coworker. He is a power-hungry suck-up who inserts himself into everything going on around the office. He is a rule follower to the extreme.
Let me just stop you right there for a second. Did Jim Halpert write this letter?
But first, welcome to our first show. I think it's time for some introductions. Matt, of course, I know who you are. You're sitting right here, but the folks listening might not.
Well, if they don't, believe it or not, I'm a recovering corporate lawyer turned comedian and executive recruiter. And let me tell you something. I've worked in more crazy workplaces than I care to ever think about.
I want to hear all about them.
And we are going to do that. What about you, Liz?
Well, I've spent many years running marketing at big global organizations, including Nike, the Oprah Winfrey Network, and National Geographic channels. I've worked in a lot of different company cultures. I've had a lot of bosses, most of them good, some bad. I've been a boss for a long time. Mainly good, I think, but occasionally bad.
We're going to have to get you to dish on that.
Yes, totally. I'd like to confess all of my sins. Plus, I run a media company with my sisters. We produce podcasts and books as the Satellite Sisters. Okay, so now let's talk a little bit about our show and what we're going to do here, Matt.
And then you guys can decide whether you even pay attention to anything that we say.
No, you must pay attention to everything that we say.
That's right, yes.
Because our goal is to help you find happiness and contentment at work. The culture is so filled with people telling you how to crush it at work, how to get rich and successful. And, that's just not what we're interested in here.
We spend more time with our coworkers these days than we do with our family and friends. That's where you get phrases like work wife and work husband. Many of my best friends in the world are actually people that I worked with. It's probably also true that some of my least favorite people in the world came from the office.
Oh, really? So who's the worst person you ever worked with?
Well, I did have a boss who once fired somebody for taking a nap.
That seems harsh.
Yeah, well, in fairness, it was during a $1 billion closing, and that someone was me. But he was a jerky boss anyway.
Okay. I'm already not surprised, Matt. Already not surprised. So on this show, we're going to listen to your calls and questions. We're going to try to understand what's really important to you and maybe help you articulate what's really important to you. And then we're going to give you our 2 cents on how to get the best result for you personally and for your career. Each episode will also be talking to a guest. We'll have all kinds of amazing people, including business experts, people who've gone through fascinating career experiences, and some people who are just fun to talk to.
Okay. Well, now that that's all settled, how about we get some listener calls?
You ready for your first call, Matt?
Let's crush it.
No crushing. We're not crushing here.
Oh, okay, fine. Let's just help people and have some fun.
Yes.
Hello?
Hey, Kelly. This is Liz and Matt with Safe for Work. How are you doing?
Hey, I'm good. How are you guys?
We are great. So I understand you've been having some issues with feedback in the workplace. Why don't you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, no problem. So I work in finance for a Fortune 50 company, and I got promoted a little less than a year ago, which was awesome. But every few months or so since I got that promotion, I've been hearing and getting feedback, mostly in the line of needing to be more professional at work. Two recent examples were I commented to another coworker that a teammate of mine who was able to get some flexible scheduling, so maybe working from home 4 out of 5 days a week and only coming into the office 1 day a week was pretty lucky, and that our department really doesn't do flexible working very well. Mm-hmm. And then the second time it happened, a manager overheard me on a Friday joking to my teammate that it might be a light day since our boss was out of the office that day. And so this feedback kind of just makes its way to me either through my manager, through my director. And I guess what I'm really wondering is, am I wrong in thinking these other managers are overreacting and kind of taking this 360 feedback too far?
Well, let me just say, first of all, I can empathize because I was the office jokester. I left my job as a lawyer to do comedy. So if anyone understands that desire to keep the workplace light, it's me. I was the guy who was joking around all the time. People would hang out. I was the office, the break room hero, let's just say. But I will say...
Every office has one.
Yeah, but I will say there were a couple of topics that I probably wouldn't have joked about. And from just quickly hearing what you're talking about, you know, the topics that you've chosen to kind of joke about are a little bit of danger areas because I guess what I would say is you're kind of cutting into the sacred cows of the workplace. Like, you know, when talking about working from home, like that's, if somebody had to ask for a work from home situation, like that's a very tough ask for them. And it's probably something that everybody, you know, has to kind of tread lightly on. So I would say, like, topic wise, if you want to make jokes, that's definitely an area that I would steer clear of because that's more like kind of passive aggressive talking badly about the workplace itself.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So it's not just jokester turf.
Yeah, I mean, Kelly, does that resonate what I'm saying? I mean, I'm a little. I guess I need to know more. You know, are the jokes that you got called out on? Was it just those, or are you getting called out? You know, constantly anytime you joke around?
Yeah. I'd say those are the examples that stick out. But I'd say I feel like it's more personality based almost. Like I tend to be a little bit louder in the aisles, I would say, than my coworkers. There may be a group of us all around talking and laughing maybe on a Friday, but then it feels like I'm the one that's getting the feedback that, you know, I need to maybe button it up a little bit more. And so it's starting to feel like my personality is a bit of a liability, just in general.
You know, Kelly, this is Liz. That's what it sounded like to me, too, when I heard you talking about it and read your original letter. To me, this sounds like coded communication, and they're trying to tell you something important, but not doing it very well. They're picking on a few random things, and that they're trying to manage not your performance, which you say is good, but your personality and behavior. And that is never a good sign. When people say things to you like, we need you to be more professional, or in your letter, it was be more mature. If you've heard that more than once or twice, that is something that you really, really need to pay attention to. Because in my experience, sometimes you can manage people through their performance. You sit down and you say you need to do this better or you need to do that better. But when you get to the point where you're saying you just need to be a different person, that's really bad. And you really need to think about whether this is the natural home for you. Because I would never say nobody should ever go into work and have to be a different person than they really are, right? So if you're outgoing and energetic in a department where they really frown upon that, then you just need to think about whether you're going to be satisfied having to edit yourself all the time. I would suggest that you won't be satisfied doing that.
Yeah, there's a lot of workplaces that I'm too loud for sure.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense. I think I hear what you're saying. Like what Matt's saying is like, I can choose the things that I talk about, right?
Sure.
The things that I choose to engage in conversation about with my coworkers. And maybe what I can't choose is, the attitude with which I bring or kind of my vibe, right? So
You're right. You can't.
I need to play with that a little bit, but I totally hear what you're saying, Matt, about the certain topics that are, hey, if you're going to talk about them, maybe take it down to the coffee shop, right? Like out of earsight of managers and directors if you really need to vent, and then balancing that with still wanting to be who I am at work.
Yeah, totally. And I like your vibe. I feel like we would get along. But at the same time, I'm glad you're hearing what I'm saying because, maybe this workplace isn't for you, but even another workplace, those two examples probably wouldn't be okay, even in a cooler, more laid back vibe.
That's good advice. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, I really appreciate the advice. I think I knew it in my heart and in my head, but it's just good to hear it from someone else that I'm not crazy for wanting to be myself, but also keeping in mind if I want to move up in any organization that, there's that level of professionalism that can vibe with my personality if I find the right place.
You can do it. Okay.
I
Good luck.
in you.
All right. Thank you, guys.
And now for our interview with Rainn Wilson. Rainn Wilson, welcome to Safe for Work.
Nice to be here.
Okay, so it is our first episode. So we're talking a lot about like our worst or best first days of work. Do you have like a worst day of work story you want to share or best first day?
I have a lot of really bad work stories.
That was just a preview. To hear Rainn's terrible work stories and the rest of the episode, find a link in the episode notes or subscribe to Safe for Work on Apple Podcasts or wherever you're listening to this.
You're listening to Diabetes Connections with Stacey Sims.
If you like what you hear, give them a try. Go subscribe and listen to Safe for Work on Apple Podcasts or wherever you're listening now. You can also find a link in the show notes for this episode. All right, so let me give you this little tidbit about Tandem and the G6. Many of you know, we've done episodes on this, that the t:slim X2, which is the pump that my son Benny wears currently, is due to have an upgrade to what they're calling Basal IQ later this year. They're hoping for FDA approval and to come out with it this summer. The Basal IQ is the low glucose suspend. Your blood sugar gets too low, the CGM talks to the pump, it backs off the insulin, and everything is nice and lovely, straight lines, that sort of thing. The X2 has the capability of being updated through your own computer. So when this comes out, you won't need to buy a new pump. You pop it into the computer. You're like updating a phone. You just get a software update. We did it last fall, almost immediately upon receiving the X2. We got I think the G5 integration came out about a week or two after we received our pump. And it was so easy. It was wonderful not to have to get a new pump. You just plug it in. So with the G6 coming out, what happens to Basal IQ, to the low glucose suspend? Well, people have to choose between getting the G5, staying with that product, and getting the low glucose suspend, or getting the G6 and not having that feature. Well, there was a first quarter results conference call by Tandem CEO recently. And in that call, they said that they've been speaking to the FDA to, quote, outline the path for us to offer t:slim X2 with Basal IQ and iCGM compatibility. This would allow for our Basal IQ system to be used with Dexcom's G6 sensors. Due to competitive reasons, we will not be outlining the regulatory path details, but we remain confident on our goals to launch the t:slim X2 with Basal IQ this summer with the G5 sensor, and we're actively working on adding iCGM or G6 sensor compatibility shortly thereafter. iCGM is the integrated continuous glucose monitoring there, so it's not a new device, just to be clear. But I thought that was pretty interesting, and the FDA has been quite speedy lately on these kind of approvals, so fingers crossed we shall see what happens. Thanks for listening to this episode. A little different, as I said, but we're exploring all sorts of new things with the podcast. Love to know what you think. You can always email me, Stacey at diabetes-connections.com. Please listen to our regularly scheduled episode this week with Sean Busby, all about the Now You See Me campaign, which is educating about people who have type 1 and another diagnosis. Sean is the founder of Riding on Insulin. He's a professional snowboarder. He's got type 1 and he's got lupus. And then next week, we're doing a Mother's Day episode. Yeah, Mother's Day is coming up. And I'll be talking to the only female FBI SWAT team member who has type 1 diabetes. And guess what? She's a new mom. Talk about setting the bar high. I'm Stacey Sims, and I'll see you back here next episode.
Diabetes Connections is a production of Stacey Sims Media. All rights reserved, all wrongs avenged.